Thanks for joining us for another episode of Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. Each week, Coach Ben and Coach Kyle share their insights, interview special guests, present teachable moments, and offer some extra words of wisdom. The victory is ours, because we've already won.
Hello and welcome to Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. I'm your host, Ben Wellman, and this is Already Won. Remember that God has given us the victory, so whatever you do, do not quit. I'm here with Kyle Apps, aka the Mad Dog. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've got the victory. Because we've already won.
Come on, you've got it. You got the hashtag right there. Well, guys, remember that this podcast is going to go through, if you're a Christian, talking about how we can use sport as a great tool in this victory. No matter if you're a player, a coach, or a top sports fan like myself and Kyle. Each week, we're going to bring you different relevant topics, great guests, and of course, teachable moments. And have we got a great guest this week, which we're going to come to. But first, Kyle, the world of sport, we've got the Carabao Cup final coming up. Last year, your team, Manchester United, beat my team, Newcastle. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Liverpool versus Chelsea. How do you think it's going to go?
So, wait, Richmond AFC didn't make it this year?
Richmond AFC did not make it. Chelsea, Liverpool this year.
But I thought they were in the same group as Team USA.
Kyle, Team USA had no chance of qualifying in this one. It's Liverpool, Chelsea in the final.
I don't understand. Well, okay, so you're going to say, I'm going to keep trying here. I think Team USA is going to qualify for one of the competitions. If not the Euros, well, they're not this year, but maybe next year Euros. They didn't make it to AFCON. I think there's a chance. The Caribou Cup, is that the animal with the antlers?
So yeah, they have different sponsors. So it's being called the Worthington Cup, the Coca-Cola Cup. So if a US company comes in and sponsors it, then maybe call something in there. But I think the best chance Team USA have got is when you host the World Cup coming up in a few years' time. So Team USA, best chance, Kyle. Keep this going till the World Cup on home soil, kind of with other Canada and Mexico as well. But yeah, best chance Team USA have got. But who do you think is going to win, Kyle? Chelsea, Liverpool? Give us a team. What do you think?
Well, I think Chelsea need it the most because they stink like nothing else. But I think it's going to be Liverpool. There's no way Liverpool is going to concede any goals. I think it's going to be 4-0 at halftime, and it'll be another 4 goals at other half. It'll be 8-0. Prediction.
You heard it here first. Mad Dog shout. Well, 2 years ago they met. It went to penalties. I think it was 0-0. So that's an outrageous shout from the Mad Dog. And it was when Kepa refused to come off, if you remember. And then it went all the way down to the goalkeepers and they missed. And Kepa missed. So maybe it might be as eventful as that. Hopefully, if your prediction's anything to go by. Well, we're looking forward to that, Kyle. We're also looking forward to today having a guest on. Have we got a great guest? Who have we got coming in, Kyle?
We've got Sir Tripp Johnston, who's been knighted by the President of the United States. Wait, no, we don't do that here. We'll just call him Tripp Johnston, who is the co-founder of Sports Friends. Also, my tongue is tied, the author of a new book that we'll talk about, Soul Brothers. It's great. He's a good friend. And there you go. There's the book. Let's do some promo.
This is from this bookshelf
on Amazon and Kindle. Yep.
We loved it. This is a fantastic book. We read it. I just had a newborn baby and I devoured it because basically it's a chapter at a time. So it's a chapter of Tripp's life and then his soul brother Brahanu, who in Ethiopia, and he talks about his life. 2 guys, completely different lives, completely different worlds, and somehow God brought them together and birthed what we have now of Sports Friends. And this book goes behind the story behind it. Now, Carl's worked with Sports Friends for 20 years. I've worked for 10 years. And we even heard some insight that we hadn't heard before. So whether you're someone who's followed the ministry for years, been a supporter, maybe you haven't heard of Sports Friends before, this book is a fantastic read to give you an overview of these 2 lives between Tripp and Brahanu. And I have to apologize for saying book as well, Carl. Does that annoy you a little bit? How do you say it?
Well, I'd say book, but that's fine. Book. And
that's it. Exactly. So people can have a little laugh at that, me saying book. I get that quite a lot whenever I say that. So yeah, let's have a chuckle for that. But looking forward to hearing. How long have you known Tripp for then, Kyle, altogether?
Well, I met him 20 years ago when he first came to Nigeria with Brian Davidson to assess what Nigeria's potential is.
Wow. And we're going to hear hopefully a little bit about that as well, because the book talks about the early days of the ministry. And I would love to hear a bit more around the expansion to West Africa and then, of course, to Southeast Asia as well. It's been fascinating for me to follow the journey as well. So really looking forward to hearing Tripp's insight and even some more stories behind this book. You know, you've got Brahano meeting Denzel Washington, going to the NBA games just before the ministry started. Incredible stories like that. And hopefully Tripp's going to share some more insight with us as well. Maybe the stories of glory that didn't even make the book. Hopefully me and Mad Dog can get those stories out of him today. So look forward to it. So Tripp Johnston is here on the Already Won podcast.
All right, here he is. I think he's on the stage. Here he is. Welcome, Sir Tripp Johnston, to Already Won podcast.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
I'm surprised we
Great
even
to
got
see you.
you scheduled into our time. I mean, I know you were on Oprah, was it last week, and you're doing the night.
Yeah, everybody's very interested in the book.
There we go.
Yeah, I mean, we've had you on. I know, you know, Joe Rogan's asked to have you on, you know, to talk about your book, but we've managed to get you on the Already Won podcast, and it's great to have you here, Tripp. You know, we're massive fans of you. You've got the big fan behind you, and I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to hearing a lot of stories that you're going to share with us now.
Yeah, I was glad to be with you guys.
So Tripp Johnston from North Carolina, unless you see the Tar Heel kind of logo there. I hope it's their year. Maybe we'll see. You know, you never know. And then Tripp Johnston, along with Brian Davidson, who I met back in 2004, I believe, when they came to Nigeria to assess the efforts and potential that Nigeria has after already starting in Ethiopia, starting football friends, I think, as it were.
Yes, no longer though. Sports friends.
There you go. We joked about that in episode 1, I think. We said, well, they went from football friends. They didn't want to use soccer friends because no one knows what either of those terms are, the agreed word of those. So we kind of settled with sports friends. I think it was a good decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so many different sports that, of course, the coaches that we train are doing now, which is brilliant. Tripp, on the book then, the title is Soul Brothers. We mentioned it a little bit before, and at the end of the book, you kind of explain how that came about, the title. I loved it. But do you want to share the story a little bit around how the book came to be called Soul Brothers?
Well, yeah, because it's the story of my good friend, Berhanu Kebeda, who's an Ethiopian, and how God brought us together. So, you know, it's a brotherhood story and, you know, brothers connected in spirit. But I was, as you alluded to, struggling with, like, what do I call this book? And for years, my working title was something different. But then God gave me a great gift. I was actually visiting Berhanu in Ethiopia. We were having a meal together. We were talking through the first draft of this book. And I was praying, God, you know, help me with what the book title should be. And all of a sudden, this Ethiopian pastor comes up to Berhanu's house, uninvited, unexpected. And this pastor has a gift of prophecy. And so he visited for a while, and I could tell Berhanu, you know, wasn't really excited about sharing the time with him because this was our special time together. And at the end, the guy was about to leave, and he said, let's pray together. So we're like, okay, let's pray together. And he says, I have a word from the Lord for Tripp. And Berhanu's elbowing me, so he gets into, you know, high gear of translating for me because my Amharic wasn't good enough to understand what he was going to share. And so he shared a number of things about how Berhanu and I are working on this book project, which we had never told him. And God was going to bring this project together and to trust him. It would be like God bringing life to the bones in Ezekiel's day, the dry bones scattered in the valley. God would bring it to life. And then he concluded by saying, Tripp, you and Berhanu are brothers. You have a relationship that is very special because I am the one who has given it to you. And I've given it to you for my purposes, for my glory. Continue on as brothers. You are soul brothers. And I'm like, okay, if it's not clear now, it'll never be clear. I think I need to call this book Soul Brothers. So that was a real gift from the Lord. And you know, as I've reflected on it and other people have interacted with me about it, they're like, yeah, oh, that's a perfect title because it is this back and forth narrative Berhanu and me and God's work in our lives, and then how he brought us together and birthed Sports Friends and gave us a beautiful friendship together as brothers.
Yeah, so tell us about your background and Berhanu's background. I mean, we're seeing some pictures here of children, so I think that's obviously there's some history there that Berhanu has in Ethiopia, and as well as yours. So we start with Berhanu.
Yeah. So Berhanu grew up in a non-Christian household, actually a house where an animistic household where they worshipped a demonic spirit, and God appeared to him at a very young age and called him to himself. Actually, in a vision, God appeared to Berhanu, and Berhanu was lying on his bed, actually contemplating murdering somebody. As a 12-year-old, somebody who had offended his father, and as in Ethiopian culture, Berhanu was the firstborn, and he's the one to, avenge a shameful act to his father. And so he's there lying on his bed, contemplating murder. And God appeared to him. It was like Berhanu described it as the ceiling scrolled back, and he saw this figure descending into his room, brilliant light, a man in a robe, just filled the whole room with light, glorious light. Berhanu, all he could do was fall on his knees at this man's feet, and the man said three things to him. Said to him, "Sin no more. You are mine, and you will carry my name to the nations." And and then he ascended. The roof scrolled back, and Berhanu's like, "Well, surely everybody saw just what I saw." And he went and he talked to his mother, and his mother's like, "No, I didn't see that. That must be our family God that has visited you." And Berhanu knew, no, this was not our family God. So others explained to him that this was Jesus who had visited him. And so from that early age of 12 years old, Berhanu knew that he was chosen. Jesus spoke to him, "You are mine." And that began an incredible journey of faithfulness on Berhanu's part, goodness on God's part. Berhanu was expelled from his home. His father tried to kill him for becoming a Christian. He was on the streets. The church took him in. He grew up in the church, basically, just different families caring for him. Then in the communist government, he was tortured and imprisoned many times. And throughout this difficult journey, God worked powerfully through him, and great fruit from his life. And I heard Ben introducing earlier, again, crazy stories of getting to visit America, getting to meet Denzel Washington and Pauletta Washington, his wife, but a story of great faithfulness and of great fruitfulness as God worked in his life. And then, God brought us together, Berhanu and me, two guys from incredibly different backgrounds. And, he had a special work for us to do together.
Oh, that's incredible hearing that, and reading it in this book is so powerful. But what was your early days like then, Tripp? So we've heard a bit of Berhanu's. Tell us about your life, and in the book it's complete polar opposite. So give us a brief snapshot of what life was like for you growing up before you met Berhanu.
Yeah, I kind of envisioned Berhanu, barefoot, dirt paths, a very modest background. Well, my background was quite different. I would say I was an achiever and was all about chasing the American dream. I want to make a name for myself, get a good education, get a good job. That picture there, marry my high school sweetheart, and make money, be successful, and really, and I did those things. I had a chance to I was awarded a full scholarship to go to university based upon merit scholarship, and then I had an opportunity to get an MBA degree from Harvard Business School, arguably the top management leadership training school in the world. And I became an investment banker, putting together corporate mergers and acquisitions, advising companies on raising capital. Really leading a very busy, demanding, highly stimulating career, but it was largely all about me. I was chasing my dreams, and I was a Christian. I'd come to faith in Christ at an early age, but I would say at this stage, I just lost my way. I mean, it's the simplest way to put it. And while believing in Jesus, God was really just getting the leftovers in my life, and there was very little left over after career pursuits. And so I went through a process of God convicting me of this. I remember at one point, my wife, Allison, as I mentioned, we were high school sweethearts, and she's a godly woman. We've been married 40 years now. I came home from working late hours as an investment banker and found a note there on the kitchen table that said, I've gone to my sisters. I've took the kids, gone to my sisters. And, when you're ready to be serious about being the kind of husband and father you need to be, well, you can come find me. Well, that was a wake-up call. And there were other wake-up calls that God used to really redirect me and bring me back to himself. And so I went through a period of really great transformation, despite continuing to enjoy a lot of success in my career. And, really just putting God first, serving him wholeheartedly, giving him the first fruits of my life. And I got more and more involved in Christian ministries and serving people, but my schedule was still so demanding that it was hard to mesh this up. Now, I could sense my heart shifting to things of the Lord, but my schedule really didn't, follow or allow that as much as I would have liked. And so Alice and I began to wrestle with, did God have something different for us? And as we were wrestling with this, by this time in my career, I'd become a senior executive in one of the largest banks in America, and I was leading a division. And one day I go in and my boss says, this is just after having a good performance review, Tripp, I've got to make a change. I'm firing you. I'm like, what? I mean, I'm the person usually delivering that message. I'm not, I don't receive that message. And I walk around in a shock. And none of it made sense to me. And over the next several weeks and months, and actually, long story short, got brought back into an even more senior role. But this was a jolt to the system. And it gave me time to reflect more on the fact that God was truly redirecting me. And it was shortly after that I got invited on the short-term missions trip to Ethiopia, and met Berhanu for the first time and began to sense a calling to something very different, like moving my family and my 3 teenage or preteen kids to Ethiopia. At the time, I think about the second poorest country in the world. So that was quite a change of direction.
It's incredible. And Tripp, in the book, you talk about how you were like number one academically in the whole country, and you went to Harvard. I would like to know. I'm a new father, so I read this book with my son on me, asleep when he was born. You went to Harvard with a newborn. How on earth did you do that? Because if you can go to Harvard with a newborn, it means I can get through every day. So how did you do that? I would just like to know that. How?
Well, it's such a blur. I don't even remember the 2 years. It was, we truly felt like aliens at Harvard Business School, because Allison and I were from the southern United States, and there weren't many people, Southerners, at Harvard. And we were married, and there were very few students who were married. And then we went with one child, and we emerged with our second child. which there were just a handful out of the 800 or 900 students in my class that year. So we felt like very different, but in some ways, so it was certainly a challenge, but also in another way, it helped keep me grounded because so many people there, and you can see how it could happen. You just kind of, it just, your studies become all there is, and the pressure of performing, and getting a good job, and the kind of career you've always dreamed of. And so, I was dealing with all that, but also, I was changing diapers and giving bottles and stuff that, as keeps you kind of grounded.
I tell you, Tripp, honestly, hats off to you. When I read that, wow, incredible. But I loved, reading the story and how God was preparing you, like even using that time, you said with your wife, that happened in the firing, even the work you were doing at the local church, you got involved, stuck in there, and that was preparing you for what was coming next. And it was clear that, God used these things. And I also loved just the insight around the way in Harvard, you said the learning style was something you struggle with a bit. And, that also I could see like kind of formed you as a leader as well, and your leadership to then, lead sports friends like you did. And it was incredible for me to hear that, and see how God really shaped you through those tough times, through those sleepless nights, through that stress. So yeah, incredible stuff. Really, really inspiring.
Yeah. Also, Ben was talking about being a father. He's young father, newborn. So when
I
you
need help.
when you first went to Ethiopia, you described in the book that it was a different world. So how was that like taking your whole family over there? I know it was like for me, but as you did the short-term trip, and now you're moving. Now you've made the whole decision to move everyone over there. I'm sure there was a few tears and a few, why are we doing this?
Yeah, you're right. The months leading up to finalizing that decision, there was a lot of wrestling, and people were asking us questions like, so when we moved to Ethiopia, just as background, my children were 17, 14, and 10. And our mission, SIM, was they were like, well, are you sure your kids want to do this? We have missionaries who've been on the field for decades and are actually coming back to their home country because their teenage and college age children are struggling, and it's kind of a hard time to move. And we're like, well, we really think this is what we're supposed to do. But people were asking us, friends and family, and of course we were asking ourselves, is it safe there? Can you get health care? Can your kids get a good education? Will you be okay? And we were wrestling with, can we trust God with our children? It was one thing for Alice and I to think about us making that decision, but would this be good for our children, and even for our oldest, Morgan, to give up her senior year of high school to go, and all the fun and traditions that go with a senior year of high school, to give that up and move to Ethiopia. As we shared with Morgan how we felt God was moving in our hearts, she prayed and she said, this isn't just about you. I feel like I'm supposed to go. I feel like God wants me to go. And our younger two kind of took their cues from her. And I remember the whole summer before school was to start, we moved into Ethiopia. Morgan prayed and prayed, and we prayed with her that God would just give her, one new good friend for her senior year of high school. She's moving into an international school with kids from all over the world. I think there was only one other American in her class. And so Morgan came home from school that first day, and we asked her, well, how was it? And she said, well, it was okay. It's going to be hard, but there was somebody today who was really kind to me, and I'm looking forward to getting to know him better. Well, that him is now my son-in-law, Morgan's husband, who was a Norwegian missionary kid, and so just an example of God's goodness in doing when we did hard things, just seeing how God provided. And certainly God had something very special for Morgan there, but really for all of us. And it was a totally different world. I mean, we're moving from affluent suburbia in America to, a very poor country. The poverty was overwhelming, and it was everywhere. You would look around, and just people in rags for clothing and on the streets, and people begging. That was one of the hardest things we had to deal with, was just the amount of begging. It was constant. Whether it's at outside of our the gate to our driveway, or at every traffic stop, and just wrestling with who do we help, who do we not help, experiencing the joy of meeting needs, and the ah, guilt and frustration of not meeting a need, and people banging on your door and screaming at you. And so it was a totally different world for us, but there was a lot of richness to the experience. In America, with kids that age, our life was really fragmented. Our kids were involved in club level soccer, football, and we were on the go and on the run. Well, we get to Ethiopia, and there's nothing to do. There's no after school activities, and we had more family time together, just sitting around the table, playing board games, card games, talking, being together. And it was rich, and the same types of experiences with other families too. We really slowed down and enjoyed being a much more relational culture. But I could tell story after story, and a number of them are in this book about how it was a very different world, but it was one that all of us came to love and enjoy. And those people who were asking us, will your kids get an education? Boy, did my kids get an education. And most of it was outside the classroom.
Wow. I mean, reading it, you went through all sorts of hardships, sickness, you robbed, car problems. It's in here, and encourage people to get it. And later on in the book, you talk about how Sports Friends began in Ethiopia. We're not going to talk about that now. We're going to encourage people to read how it began there. I'm interested with Kyle here as well. After Ethiopia was started, what happened in terms of expansion to West Africa? Tripp, why don't you go first, and then Kyle can jump in a little bit. What happened after Ethiopia?
Well, actually, the roots of our expansion to Nigeria were began even before we moved to Ethiopia, because our mission, SIM, was working with us to explore where would be the best place to pilot and kick off the Sports Friends ministry. And the mission was very excited about it, but hey, they were like, great idea, but you have to go figure it out somewhere and demonstrate it. And the choice was coming down between Nigeria and Ethiopia. And for a number of reasons, we ended up starting in Ethiopia, but Nigeria was very much still in our mind. And there were some missionaries there in Nigeria who were big sports fans, understood the potential and power for sports ministry. So even as we were beginning the ministry in Ethiopia, there was kind of a constant interaction of, when are you going to come to Nigeria and help us get started there? So while Brian Davidson and myself, who were the co-founders of Sports Friends, were in Ethiopia, we began to make some trips to Nigeria to share the vision. And of course, the big issue we were struggling with in terms of thinking about expansion was, well, how do we do that? We're going to need God to raise up some people who will share this vision and that we can invest in, who can lead this effort. And so as we went to Nigeria and began to share vision, we had our eyes open for who those people might be. And on that trip, we met Kyle.
That's a good thing or bad thing. You're not really being very clear here.
he said that God brought you, Kyle. So take that as you like.
Yeah, he had to.
He works in mysterious ways. God works in
settle.
mysterious ways. Yeah.
But I do. I mean, I always said this to Tripp too. I think when Tripp and Brian showed up, and I didn't know these guys from anyone, and it was always, I was trying to push other people towards them. But someone said, because you're doing sports already, I grew up doing sports. I do, and I love, in this order, love God, love Jesus, love my family now. I love doing youth ministry, and I love sports. So when that came in, and I saw the connection, the passion to make it grounded in the local church, not just individuals, because there's a lot of sports ministries out there. They're doing great work, but their focus is individuals, star athletes, coaches, whatever you want to do. But this was it was to be embedded into the church. That was it was going to be their program, their outreach, they're doing it. So I think that was what sold me, and I just, it was just amazing to see how Tripp and Brian continued to put up with me and allow me to do certain things and keep going. But I appreciate that from the beginning, that the way the focus was, and there was no deviation from it. So I think that there's no question there, but I appreciate your vision. And maybe how do you think the church was the bedrock? How did you come about making this sports ministry embedded into the church rather than just another thing for the church?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really has been the defining vision from day one, and is still the defining vision. And I would credit Brian Davidson with that perspective. He had spent the first 20 years of his life doing sports ministry, and what he saw, I think, most missing in the global world of sports ministry was empowering and equipping, enabling the local church to carry on ministry. He had been part of taking short-term teams from America and going and doing different ministry initiatives, and God certainly worked through those. But after the short-term team left, the local church was kind of left with, well, what do we do now? We can't replicate what that team did. How do we do ministry, and what could be ongoing? So that was the vision, was to equip the local church to have an ongoing ministry, and where there wasn't a local church, to equip church planters who could go into a community and build relationships, and through those share the love of Christ. And the power of that is enormous. To equip God's church, his transformational agent in the world, with a new tool, a new strategy, a new vision for ministering to young people, building relationships, first initiated in a sports context, and then just being a life coach more than a sport coach with those young people, and seeing them come to understand who Jesus is, and hopefully walk with him. And then the local church has resources, has people. It's hopefully a constant in communities that we wanted to build on that bedrock, as you said.
So good. And so we've heard about the ministry ablaze. We can read it in the book, and we've heard a little bit West Africa, but there was also a chapter on hardships and some incredible difficulties that you face. We've heard about a little bit in Ethiopia, but as the ministry has grown, we're now 22 years on from that time. I mean, the ministry has flourished. Probably beyond, like, reading the book, it was clear, beyond what you could ever probably have imagined. Yeah. But what kind of hardships have you seen as over those last 22 years, other than the one that's in the book?
Constant hardships and challenges. I mean, we face a real enemy who wants to defeat and discourage and divide. As you would expect, there have been constant challenges, and those are at the micro level. We could go and interview probably any of the 12,000 coaches now serving in Sports Friends, and they would share some hardship to the ministry, and to global challenges or national challenges, to overall funding challenges. So the challenges are constant. I mean, we've entered a country in South Asia, started ministry, and then basically had to shut the whole ministry down because of the persecution level, and our leaders there were run out of the country. And for me, having led the ministry, for the first 20 years, one of the big challenges for me was always trying to discern, okay, is this a roadblock that the enemy has placed here that we need to, in God's power and strength, push through, or is this God redirecting us? And that is a really tough thing to wrestle with in leadership. And I mean, there's no simple answer other than trusting that God will reveal the answer to that question. And if it's, something that we're to persevere in and overcome, that He will give us the strength and ability and the wisdom to know to do that, and to be able to do that. And if He's redirecting it for Him to make that clear to us as well, because He certainly uses closed doors to redirect us as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think we're almost out of time, but we'll give you the plug to talk about where we can get your book, how they can get your book. But I do also want to remind people that we didn't talk about it, but that's for the book. This picture here, can you just describe who the man and the woman is, and the little child that Brown is with?
Yeah,
just
so
quickly.
Berhanu's in the white dress outfit there, and at his waist there is his nephew, who was in Ethiopia, essentially given a death sentence because he had a brain tumor that could not be dealt with in Ethiopia. And God opened a door for Berhanu to bring his nephew to Los Angeles, to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, one of the great medical institutions in America, and for free to receive life-saving brain surgery. And in that experience, Berhanu ended up getting to know a number of the patrons and famous people who were involved at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, including Denzel Washington's wife, Pauletta Washington, and that's her in the picture there. And then the other gentleman is Keith Black, I believe that's his name. He's led the neurosurgery department at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. So Berhanu ended up with this wonderful experience of being in Los Angeles and kind of hobnobbing with the famous and wealthy, and but when faced with the question of should he make a new life in America or go back to Ethiopia, God brought him back to Ethiopia. And the next week is when I met him, and Sports Friends began, at least in concept.
That's right. You can read about that story and plenty more other great stories of Tripp and Berhanu's connection, God connection, as it were, to continue to keep Sports Friends, the ministry alive. So thanks, Tripp. Maybe tell us where we can pick up the book and what the proceeds go for.
Yeah. So the book is available on Amazon, in all the worldwide Amazon stores for the print copy. And then you can get a digital Kindle version as well. I guess probably anywhere in the world. And proceeds go to support Berhanu in part in his ministry. We're definitely soul brothers. So, one of the benefits of you buying a book is to help him, support him in his ministry.
I love Tripp at the end of the book. You talk about join us. There's a few pages, inviting people in. And I just wonder, the next 20 years ahead, people listening to this conversation, people reading this book, I'm sure it's your prayer, as it is our prayer as well, that, God will continue to bring more people to hear this story and to believe that the next 20 years may even be, the best is yet to come in the next 20 years as well. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the stories. And I'm looking forward to continue to, asking you privately when I'm struggling with my young baby and saying, Tripp, give me some more wisdom because I need help. So yeah, that was awesome, Tripp. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Happy to join you all. God bless.
So good to have Tripp on the podcast. Not only just the book promotion, which is great. Buy your copy of the book right now, Soul Brothers. But also just the history of Sports Friends, how him and Brian started Sports Friends and how Berhanu was involved, and even how they came to Nigeria. There's some great stories there. I think people need to pick up a copy and read. It's a wake up call for a lot of people to say, hey, I may be at a certain level, but God can still use me, and we need to be obedient to that.
For sure. I mean, the whole book glorifies God so much. And I'm looking forward, Carl, to you telling us more stories in these podcasts around your experience in West Africa. I'm sure I know you've got stories to tell. being held up at gunpoint and everything else, So lots of stories to come from the Mad Dog. But to close, Carl, what are we going to finish with to close?
Wildman's Weekly Words.
There we go. We need a jingle for this. We need a jingle. So this week we've got what we do in life echoes in eternity, and that I think is from Gladiator. I'm pretty sure it's Marcus Aurelius, but after Tripp being on, what we do in life echoes in eternity, and honestly, the eternal impact that Tripp and Brahanu and Brian, starting Sports Friends, they've had on a multitude of young people, a multitude of coaches around the world. They'll never know the true impact until I think they get to paradise and get face to face with God and see the eternal impact. But you and I can continue that legacy, Kyle. What we do in life, trying to live for God with that kingdom perspective. And you guys who are listening, if you want to be part of this and continue to maybe sow into the ministry financially or pray into the ministry, just remember that quote: "What we do in life echoes in eternity." I know maybe you don't feel this radical call to go like Tripp did, but you can still be part of the incredible work, even from your own office where there's loads of books like this, by being part of Sports Friends in that way. So that's WWW, Kyle. You like that quote?
Yeah, I do. Love it. Good challenge as well. Good way to get people motivated and involved. So, yep.
So
perfect.
It's kind of like a quote. It's like a quote and a teachable moment right there, right? In one, 2 in 1 right there. 2 in 1. Teachable moment and a bit of wisdom. There we go. We love it. We love it.
Let's get out of here. Next week,
Fantastic.
Next time, Tuesdays. Thanks for joining us, people.
Thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll see you next time with Mad Dog and the Wildcat.
Tell your friends. Tell your friends' friends.
Tell your friends' parents.
And your friends'
I
parents.
told my friends' parents. My friends' parents were like, "Why are you speaking to me?" Kyle told me.
See? Exactly. Obedience is crucial. 5-star reviews as well, people. Follow, like, and subscribe, and follow. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on Already Won, a Sports Friends podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe on your